All right, guys, we started this unit discussing colonies, discussing the original 13 colonies and their relationship with Great Britain, the mother country. Yes, resources were involved. There also was an element of needing more space. Britain is small, it is very contained, it is an island, and they needed more space for more people. Do colonies exist today? Yes. One that might be familiar to you in one way would be Puerto Rico. It's technically a territory of the United States, but we're going to be talking about colonies and territories and empire. This unit is called imperialism, and imperialism with an I is the same thing as empires. Don't know why they use an I or an E, but it means the same thing. We talked about colonies, but we're going to talk about empire. There is a small difference. It's subtle, but I want to make sure you understand what that is. Colonialism, creating colonies, creating settlements, is the reason behind it. The inspiration really does have to do with space or trying to create Little Britain somewhere else, trying to create Little Britain over in Virginia and Maryland and New York and Pennsylvania. But it's if we get some resources along the way, wonderful, all the better. But the original goal is more about space and territory. With imperialism, it is about power. It is about demonstrating your power, your superiority over someone else. So these European countries are going to go around the globe with the intent of demonstrating their power through control. Empires, though, are not a brand new concept. Empires have existed before. We will look back again at the American colonies, at North America before the 1800s. This was largely how empire looked. You would send some forces over, a little bit of military, and then you'd send citizens over. We have the British colonies, which became part of America. New France was really about trading, eventually when they learned how many furs were there. But look at parts of Canada and the French Canadian speakers in Quebec, creating French settlements. New Spain is Mexico, creating Spanish settlements. And along the way, they will get resources. The imperialism we look at, a new type of imperialism, takes place after 1850 and now is on a much larger scale. This is possible because of, well, one, transportation. With the Industrial Revolution, we have steamboats. It is easier and more economical for European countries to travel to these great distances across the globe. There are innovations like the Suez Canal, shortcuts, but transportation is a huge part of it. So why do these European countries go to these new locations? What is motivating them? We're going to look at 5 different motives for why European countries go to other parts of the globe. First is economic. This comes straight out of the Industrial Revolution and the need and the desire for cash. We talked about social mobility and class consciousness and demonstrating your wealth. In order to do that, though, you need the raw materials. And within a short time, Europe itself can no longer supply the necessary raw materials. They need to look to other locations to get more raw materials. And they're not going to send their own citizens around the world to get those materials. They will use local citizens, often through slave labor. Those raw materials sent back to Europe, manufactured into finished products, and now those finished products can be sold to that new territory. Just like we saw with the Americans, Americans were forced to buy finished products made from raw materials that came from their labor. Some of the raw materials that will become incredibly important for the imperialism we're looking at are tea. Tea becomes a huge part of British culture, and it comes from China, India, and will eventually be grown in Eastern Africa. You have to put sugar in your tea. It doesn't grow in Europe, so you need to grow it in Africa or South America or the Caribbean. These are rubber trees. Rubber is a natural product. You tap the tree just like you would with maple syrup, and natural liquid latex comes out. It's the sap of the tree, and then that can be refined into rubber. You need rubber for tires, for new modes of transportation, new uses in clothing, also to insulate electrical wiring. All these things that are now possible and happening in the Industrial Revolution. We have this type of palm that has this kernel. It's very, very oily. Perhaps you have one in your neighborhood. That oil can be used as a fuel source or for lubrication for all these machines back in the factories. Also, oil is important for making soap. We want to clean things. We want things to be nice. So palm olive comes from olive oil and palm oil. With diamonds, now this isn't a resource that we need. This is a resource that we want. It's pretty. It is desirable. And as European countries go to these new locations, they find that there's this mineral and it's beautiful. And De Beers is a company that will control about 90% of the world's diamond sources at that time. And they start this ad campaign that, guys, you need to buy a diamond ring for your fiance. And this whole idea of what is desirable. Now, diamond mining is very difficult. Europeans don't want to do that labor. They will, of course, use local, essentially slave labor. New foodstuffs, new exotic fruits. If you can serve mango or kiwi at your dinner party, your neighbors know that you're more exotic. And going back to the idea of class consciousness, making others aware of your wealth. Now, cotton is not a new resource. Cotton had been farmed, as you know, in the American South for decades. But with American independence, Britain can no longer rely on that source of cotton. We'll need to look elsewhere. Just like with the Industrial Revolution, when businesses had to invest, empires need to invest. They need cash to begin with in order to make more cash. They need to pay the explorers, pay the sailors, pay the governors of these new territories. For some countries, this won't be possible. They won't have enough money to make it happen. For others, they will have the money up front, they will create an empire, and eventually they will run out of money because you can't just let it run on its own. An empire requires upkeep. We'll see this with the British Empire. Secondly, we have nationalism and political rivalries. Europe didn't all of a sudden get larger. Territory is the same size, and country borders have been pretty well established by the late 1800s. So in order to gain power, European countries need to look elsewhere. They need to look to new territories on other parts of the globe to demonstrate their power. Some countries also are seeking legitimacy. They are seeking other people to acknowledge, yes, you are a true country. You are a real country. Germany is one country that's interested in that. They only unified in 1871. Italy also very interested in proving to other nations because they are a teenager country. They're established in 1860. And then we have France. France has existed for centuries. It is not a new country. It's not an unknown country. But what is different is with the French Revolution and with Napoleon, France feels the need to reestablish, to repair their reputation. When the European countries are fighting over territory on the other side of the globe, it does make things awkward back in Europe. Europe is still very small. Everyone sort of lives next door to each other in a small neighborhood. If you have tension somewhere else, it's going to cause tension back at home. And one famous phrase to demonstrate this whole idea of political motivation is that the sun never sets on the British Empire. Britain was looking to be the best, and we've talked about this concept before. The sun never sets is both figurative and literal. Figuratively, they are saying our power will never diminish. We will always be the best. Literally, they're saying no matter where you are on the globe, or no matter what time of day, the sun is shining on British property. Here you see everything in pink or red belongs to Britain as of 1897. In every single time zone, Great Britain holds territory. A modern way to look at this is what side of the road we are driving on currently. Everything in red is British, or was British at one time, was part of the British Empire, and currently drives on the left side of the road. Everything in gray used to drive on the left side of the road, but has in the last 90 years changed, moved to the way we drive in America. And everything in black drives on the right side of the road. Even today, we can still see the echoes, the impacts of British Empire. looking at ads from the time, that even companies want to attach themselves to this idea of British superiority, that this coffee is so British that the British soldiers on the other side of the world choose this one because it's the best. Or the symbol of John Bull, who is the British equivalent of Uncle Sam. He is sitting on top of the world demonstrating his power, and hey, guess what? He drinks Epps cocoa. Or here we see an ad for a portable type stove. We see all of these different peoples from the world using what we would call very stereotypical, even racist illustrations demonstrating these people's ethnicities. They love this stove so much, and they are also grateful to Queen Victoria, so they want to gift her one of these stoves. Thirdly, we have religion. Just like the Jesuits, now this is, evangelism is more widespread, multiple denominations. Sometimes they are, in a way, explorers because they are the first to go to new locations. Their goal is to spread the good news of Jesus Christ, to tell people about the Bible, and bring them that joy that we know. And when they get there, they are also struck by Jesus' words to care for the least of these. They realize that many people in these new places are sick and ill or die early, and so many missionaries create hospitals. Once they are well enough to hear the good news, they realize these people don't read. They're not able to read the good news for themselves. Yes, we could tell them about them, but we want them to read these words themselves, and so they create schools. Schools and hospitals are wonderful things, but it is assuming that the Western or the white or the European way is superior. Often, just as today with missionaries wanted to develop, they wanted to do life with these people. They want to become a part of the community in order to be listened to. That is still the same. Their heart, their intent is for good, for glory, for God mostly. One missionary I'd like you to know about in particular is Dr. David Livingstone. He is British, and he wants to end the slave trade. Even though slavery was mostly over and done with by this time in America, the slave trade still was rampant in Africa. Different tribes fighting against each other, and when one would be defeated, they could be sold. So his goal is to end the slave trade because he sees that it is so contrary to God's love. Because he is the first person looking for new tribes to witness to, he does become an explorer. He discovers Victoria Falls and Lake Malawi in eastern Africa, and he's writing letters back home to Britain about these wonderful things he's discovered. He names them after Victoria because Queen Victoria, he is honoring her. He had been sending back reports of his discoveries and the people he met, but then nobody hears from him for 6 years. And the public's a little bit interested. What happened to him? Did he die? Was he eaten? Has he been made some sort of deity by an African tribe? So an American newspaper hires this British explorer, Henry Morton Stanley, and his job is to retrace Livingstone's steps and find him. And eventually he does. Livingstone is the only white guy that Stanley has seen for months, the only white guy in the village, and he says, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?" I mean, who else could it be? And so that becomes a pretty famous phrase in history. Here is Livingstone, as I said earlier, one of the relatives of our very own Brad Livingstone. Here you see Victoria Falls. You can see how the first European man to see this, the first Western man to see this, to know that no one else has seen this before, that would be a pretty impressive sight. And there at the bottom, there is Stanley finding Dr. Livingstone. Fourth, we have ideology, belief systems. The Europeans truly believed that they were bringing civilization to the rest of the world. Look at what the Europeans have accomplished with the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. Why shouldn't everyone else have these things? In particular, they called Africa the Dark Continent, both because the people living there had very dark skin, that the interior was unknown, it was dark to our knowledge, and also that these people were dark to the abilities that Europeans have. It is, we need to share the light of everything we know. This is a sort of burden as demonstrated by Rudyard Kipling in his poem White Man's Burden. Kipling grew up in India, part of the British Empire, and was very pro-Britain. White Man's Burden is a poem about how we, as the Europeans, it is our responsibility to bring civilization to other people around the world. It's a bit racist. It's very racist, actually, to think that he is superior, that his ways are much better than anyone else's ways. Another way of looking at this is paternalism, that other people around the world, whether in Africa or Asia or India or South America, that they just don't know, like stupid little kids, in the way that your parents had to teach you not to touch a hot stove. You didn't know. They had to teach you the right way. In the same way that Europeans need to teach other cultures the right culture, the better way to do things. We see this demonstrated two ways here. On the bottom, we see John Bull and Uncle Sam carrying these native peoples, taking the burden of these peoples over boundaries like ignorance and brutality and slavery and cannibalism, all with the goal of reaching civilization. That is what the Europeans felt they were doing. But up in the corner, if you see in the black and white illustration, what it was really more like was that the natives of these other people, they shouldered the burden of carrying these European and white nations to prominence, to power. Then we have exploration. Sometimes you just want to know. What's there? I don't know. Why did Christopher Columbus travel? He wanted to find something. He was interested. He wanted to find a route. He wanted to know. Usually, as a result, there will be some economic gain. We need more of this resource, or what resources are there that we don't know about? So we have these motivations, and then so we've got economic, political, religious, ideological, and exploration. And we created an acronym. So create some way to remember these 5 motivations, because these are going to be really important through the rest of this unit.